All right, so we are reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We are on the day Sunday, December 16th, 1883. And I'm getting way lost here in the chapter, but we've been talking with Ramakrishna M and I and Mr. Mukherjee. They've been in the room and they were talking about the Vedanta. And the last thing M said is thing he's just pondering to himself about the Vedanta. He had studied a little of the Vedanta. He had also read the German philosophers such as Kant and Hegel, whose writings are only a faint echo of the Vedanta. But Sri Ramakrishna did not arrive at his conclusions by reasoning, as do ordinary scholars. It was the Divine Mother of the universe who revealed the truth to him. These were the thoughts that passed through M's mind. A little later, well, that's interesting, because someone else was talking about that also. I got a letter from somebody asking a bunch of these, very high end questions. What are these different levels of samadhi, and how does one achieve them, and how are they different? And you know, it's always interesting when people ask those questions because I can't imagine why they want to know. It's like those things are you know so high. They're things that really can't be talked about. I mean, you can put them in academic context. You can come up with a definition and you can come up with this, that, and the other, but it's meaningless in that context because those are experiences. Those are isnesses. Those are a drawing close to our real nature, and it's not helpful to know things about those things. It's actually an inhibition to know those things through the mind because the mind won't be there when you reach them. The mind will be silenced by then, and that information will not be what it's telling you what is. It will be direct experience. And so in spiritual life, it's really good to keep your nose at the level that you're at, and work on the things that you're working on. Do your yamas and your niyamas, your purifications and your disciplines and your meditations and your japam, and spend a good amount of time doing that. The readings, I'm going to say from the bhakti perspective, from the readings, that's really more holy company. We don't need to go in and find, and become spiritual biologists, where we know all the chakras and we know all of the interior design of the shushumnas and all of these things. The point is not to become spiritual biologists. All of that information is really just there to kind of validate our experiences, so that whether you're going in the right direction or not. And so all those things are mentioned in the scriptures and described in detail as roadmaps for us so that we can verify our experience and verify our direction to make sure that we're not being fooled by our ego and whatnot. So in spiritual life, it's better to know a lot about where you are and just have a few ideas about what lies up there and as far as what they have to do with truth, so that you can get an idea. Egoism is a problem. Okay, silent mind is a necessity. And then go about doing that. It's the other stuff, I don't know. I'm a little bit conservative, I guess, in that way, because I hear people, devotees that have been around for a long time, and they know a lot of that stuff. They have all those words defined. They know all of their Sanskrit terms, but where's the practice? Where's the change in their character? Where's the change in their heart? How deep is their love? What are they known for? Are they known for love? And, Vivekananda really admonishes us in that regard and says there's only two ways to know that you're spiritually growing. One, are you unselfish? And that's kind of taking care of the knots, so I'm not doing just things for myself. I'm not being selfish. But then there's the proactive one. Am I being loving? That's the one where you're not just not doing things, you're not being selfish, but you're also not just not being selfish, you're loving, you're reaching out, you're trying to serve your community around you. And that is how we judge spiritual life. It's not a matter of whether you can pass the test or not, whether you can do your flashcards or not. These things are interesting, and it's fine. It's not at all forbidden. It's not even really discouraged. It's just, I've just met a lot of people in the 30 years I've been around where they really put their focus on learning their stuff academically, but they're just an ordinary person like everyone else. There's no change there. There's no difference there. Their life, if you put them in the mall, they fit in just like everybody else in the mall. And that's always been my my own personal concern about religiosity, about spiritual life. Even when I was a young Christian growing up, I always thought, I remember when I was 7, sitting in church in Germany, actually, in a small room in Kaiserslautern, where the mission was, and the minister was going on and giving this hellfire and brimstone talk about how without Jesus, without being saved, that we're all condemned to this horror of hell. And I was getting horrified. I mean, I was getting really afraid. But I looked around the room and I got really confused because he could have been talking about banana bread, with the faces that were on around the people around me. I mean, I was listening to this thing like all my friends are going to hell, all my favorite people to hang out with are all going to hell. And I was, in a sense of panic. I was like, we better do something about this right away. And I'm looking around the room, and it's just, just flat faces everywhere. And I thought, what is this religion? What is this? I don't understand. How can he be saying that and this be the reaction? I must really be missing something. And and it always used to bother me that we were always so heavily encouraged to go out and invite people to come to church, and we would have special bring your neighbor Sundays, and bring your children to summer camp, and bring your children to just all this work. And I always thought to myself, I was like, God, if there was something here, if maybe we were more loving, like Jesus was talking about, maybe if we were more generous, we wouldn't have to go out and beg and plead everybody to come on a Sunday. We wouldn't have to invite people at all. If you've got the answer, people are going to see it in you. They're going to be attracted to you. They're going to ask you about it. They're going to be like, God, you're such a great person. How'd you end up that way in this world? And that's always my concern about, especially in my Vedanta now. It's about my life. It's like, of course, I never fool anybody into being an academic, but nonetheless, it's much more about what you are. And these words on these pages have to come off of these pages. They have to come out of these outlines. They have to come off of these textbooks, and they have to be imprinted. We have to sit and ruminate on them. We have to know their truth, and we have to go searching inside to see, why can't I see this? Why doesn't the world look this way to me? How am I sitting? Because every time you sit, you have the potential to realize God. In that moment, there's nothing extra needed. There's nothing else that you need to get. There's nothing else that you need to know. We already know all that we need to know. What we have to do now is that grand renunciation, that grand self-control, that grand yearning for the beloved. And that's what's necessary. It's not knowing one more thing. It's not even one more lecture. That doesn't mean I don't want anybody to come to class on Thursday, but but it's, the reason we do these things is to bring these words out of these books and into our hearts, into our lives. And when Paul says it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, and when it's Mother that says, that we are all divine by nature, and when Vivekananda says we are all potentially divine, that means that's what we are, and that's what we should be looking like. That's what people should be recognizing, what we should be recognizing, at least in each other and in ourselves. And so so these things, you see how M wonders about them. After Ramakrishna talks about them, he wonders about them on his own. He thinks about them. He's like, well, what is this actually? What was he saying? What did he mean by that? And so that's where M was, and that's what they were talking about. A little later, Sri Ramakrishna and M were conversing on the porch west of the master's room. No one else was there. It was a late winter afternoon, and the sun had not yet gone below the horizon. M, is the world unreal? Master, why should it be unreal? What you are asking is a matter for philosophical discussion. In the beginning, when a man reasons following the Vedantic method of not this, not this, he realizes that Brahman is not the living beings. He's not the universe. He's not the 24 cosmic principles. All these become like dreams to him. Then comes the affirmation of what has been denied, and he feels that God himself has become the universe and has become all of the living beings. Suppose you are climbing to the roof by the stairs. As long as you are aware of the roof, you are also aware of the stairs. He who is aware of the high is also aware of the low. But after reaching the roof, you realize the stairs are made of the same material, brick lime and dust, as the roof. Further, I have given the illustration of the bell fruit. Both changeability and unchangeability belong to one and the same reality. The ego cannot be done away with. As long as I consciousness exists, living beings and the universe must also exist. After realizing God, one sees that it is he himself who has become the universe and the living beings. But one cannot realize this by mere reasoning. Right? So this is not something that we can know just by knowing things, doing a good outline. Right? This is not even a matter of understanding. This is not something conceptual that we can put into the mind. This ultimate truth of everything as a singularity, we can wrap out an academic thought around that. We can come up with a philosophical idea that points at that, but we can never understand the thing itself, in an academic way, because to think about it clearly is to go into ecstasy. To understand what it means is to see God. So this is where we're at with these kinds of things, with these higher truths. And so he says that the world unreal because that's one of the ways that Vedanta gets ill digested, is when we think, oh, this is all unreal, and then it becomes meaningless. And then we talk about detachment all the time, and we assume that that's the way to be. And so, we kind of withdraw from everything, and we get silent, and we laud the hermit that goes off by himself. And that is all possible and all true, but it is not the central path. It's not where we end up. Our path is our life. Our path is the way that we live. Our way to God is through being, through living. And so we have to take these truths, and we have to put them into our being so that we can see. So he tells us, he says, yeah, no, the world is real, but it's not what you think it is. right? But it doesn't really help to know what it is, because these things aren't reached by reasoning. They're reached by I don't even want to say experience, because at a level it stops being experience also, because there's no separation between the experiencer and that which is being experienced. And the farther you go toward that singularity, the fainter and fainter that line of division becomes. And so he says, really, these things, these asking questions like that, it's really a philosophical idea. Don't really go there. Understand that through our renunciation of not this, not this, we get an idea of who we are, naturally, and we live with that and work with that and practice that and sit with that. And as that begins to develop, we realize that this unchanging reality, which is Brahman, and this constantly changing, non-repeating world that we live in, that they are not two different things, that they are one thing. And all you have to do is think about that for a few minutes, and you come to realize this isn't something you can fit in your head. This is not a causality situation. This is a transcendental discussion that we're having here. And the brain is not equipped for transcendental conversation, because it is what needs to be transcended. It's what we have to go beyond. And so he says, no, it's not really unreal. There is a reality to it, but it's not as it seems. And that all of these things here, yeah, they don't have a reality because they're always changing. They only stay in that particular form for a breath, and then they change form and there's something else. But there is something there that is unchanging through that whole process. And we come to realize that that is the beloved, the presence of God, the presence of the divine. Or if you want, divine mind would be a way of thinking about it. And that everything, just like in a dream, everything that you see in your dream is made of mind stuff, whatever that is. What is it that shows you something in your mind? I have no idea what that is. How is it that we can close our eyes and go to sleep and see oceans and mountains and covered wagons and boats and people and monsters and animals? How is that possible? Because all of those things are made only of the mind, even though they look like what they're playing to be. And they also change continually within the dream. And so Thakur is kind of pointing us in that direction, saying that's more the nature of things. It's that just like in the dream, you can't say there's nothing there, right? Because there is something there. You're experiencing it all. And you can't say that it's without meaning, because you're engaged and you're doing something. But you can say that it's not what you think it is. And that if you knew what it was, you would be completely different in the way that you existed in the middle of it. Right? And so our focus here is the presence of God, everywhere, always around us. And sitting here, and even, when Vivekananda was being taught these truths from Ramakrishna, Vivekananda kind of ridiculed Ramakrishna, told him, sat there like, oh, and the teacup, the teacup is God, is it? Oh, the tea bag here, this is also God, is it? And this saucer, this is God, right? And then ironically, not very long later, he was given the experience by Ramakrishna, and he was in fact sitting there having tea, and he couldn't drink his tea or have his meal, because he couldn't see it as a teacup. He couldn't see it as God. He could only see everything as God. And so at this level it's playing. At this level it's playing with the giants, really. It's like looking at it from where we are. It's movie. It's like, wow, that's amazing. Wow, that's cool, right? And so ours is to move ourselves into that space. And he tells us right here something, that the ego cannot be done away with. So we're not going to be, we're not going to have that perfectly pure mind, that's completely free of me and mine. But what we do is we minimize the action of ego within ourselves, and try and get it as small as possible. So it really just becomes an awareness of the observer. more than anything. It just becomes an awareness of the observer so that we can watch and see things as purely as possible with as few lenses of attachment as possible in front of us. And then with that ego that's left over, we make it the lover of God. We make it the servant of God. We make it the child of the Divine Mother. And we think of ourselves, which isn't separate, but will always remain a sense of separateness until realization. But we have to take that separateness and make it as pure as possible, so that we don't have all of these layers of desires, likes, dislikes, aversions, and attractions that cause us to act in very mischievous ways as we think we're a body and a mind. So he says the ego cannot be done away with. As long as I consciousness exists, living beings in the universe must also exist. So all of this is going to be here as long as there's ego in us. After realizing God, one sees then that it is he himself, God, who has become the universe, who has become all of the living beings. But one cannot realize this by mere reasoning. Shiva has two states of mind. First, the state of samadhi, when he is transfixed on the great yoga. Okay, that's pure mind. That's absolute unchanging. That's mind with no thought. That's pure mind. So that's the first state of samadhi, when he is transfixed in the great yoga. He is then atmarama, satisfied in the self. Second, the state when he descends from samadhi and keeps a trace of ego. Then he dances about chanting Rama Rama, right? That means that dancing about is this universe, right? And that chanting of Rama Rama is that movement of love that's making everything happen. The inspiration of love that makes everything happen in this world. And so in Shiva, he here is giving us a metaphor or an understanding. In Shiva lies the oneness, right? In Shiva is the dancing, chanting expression of the divine, as well as the samadhi, the absolute unchanging, that both of those exist simultaneously within Shiva. And I've kind of playing with the idea. I don't know it enough to say that it's teachable, but I play with the idea that we're all copies of that, that the macrocosm and the microcosm are the same, like Vivekananda says, that Shiva's put together like this. Well, we also are put together like this. And we also have within ourselves that absolute unchanging, which is the shrine of the heart, the presence of God, that me that has been looking out, that me that couldn't wait to have hairy legs when he was 7 years old, that that me that was looking out in the back seat of the car on the way to church as a kid, and the me that's looking at you on my iPad right now, that me is unchanged. That me has always been the same me. Everything around it has changed, but that sense of isness, that being, has always been the same. And that's the absolute unchanging aspect of us. That's the presence of God in us. And then mind, where as thoughts keep rolling by and are tied to the senses and just delivering one piece of information after another, that's the world, that's the universe, that's the changing, non-repeating manifestation of God. And so we also, like what he's describing here in Shiva, we also have these two elements within us. And I've come to suspect that absolute unchanging self, which is in there, is where our realization is waiting for us. It exists already constructed, already ready to go. It's just waiting for us to move our identity out of mind, out of the changing, and to withdraw into the self, into the heart space, into the shrine of the heart. And once we put our identity there, we're very close to realization at that point. Did the master describe Shiva to hint at his own state of mind? It was evening, and Sri Ramakrishna was meditating on the Divine Mother and chanting her holy name. The devotees also went off to solitary places and meditated on their chosen ideals. Evening worship began at the temple garden and the shrines of Kali and Radhakrishna and Shiva. It was the second day of the dark fortnight of the moon. Soon the moon rose in the sky, bathing the temple, the trees, the flowers, and the rippling surface of the Ganges in its light. The master was sitting on the couch, and M was sitting on the floor. The conversation turned to the Vedanta. Master to M: why should the universe be unreal? That is the speculation of philosophers. After realizing God, one sees that it is God himself who has become the universe and all living beings, right? And so that's really a wonderful thing to contemplate, that one sentence. Because we can read over it and think we understand it, but we don't understand it because we still live the same way. But that sentence right there should change everything about the way we act in this world. Just that sentence there. One sees that it is God himself who has become the universe and all the living beings. So there is nothing here but God. That all of you that I'm looking at right now, how do I stop looking at you and seeing names, seeing personalities? How do I look at you and stop seeing separate beings with genders and ages and dwellings? It's like, what do we have to do? Well, what we have to do is see it in ourselves. We have to go deep within, because what we see ourself as being, we map that on everyone else. Because I have no way of knowing you. I cannot ever climb into your mind and see your arrangement of attachments and aversions and lenses and memories and all of the things that you put into your words. I have no access to that. So I have to watch your facial expressions very carefully. And I see you do one that I do. And I'm like, oh, that means that then. Oh, I saw her smile. Oh, when I smile, that's a good thing. Okay, so we're in good territory, right? We project because we only know ourselves. That's all we can know. And so if we can't see these things in the world around us, it's because we're not seeing them in ourselves. And so we need to go and do this exercise. We need to go and sit and look around our inner world until we can find the evidence of Satchitananda, until we can find God, that unchanging center of what we are, until we can experience what that love arises, inspires within us, that bliss, that joy, that natural compassion. The Divine Mother revealed to me in the Kali temple that it was she who had become everything. She showed me that everything was full of consciousness. The image was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The water vessels were consciousness. The door sill was consciousness. The marble floor was consciousness. Everything was consciousness, right? Well, consciousness is just another word. That's the word I probably should have used instead of mind stuff, right? In your dream, everything that you see is consciousness, right? And one of the most important aspects of that, at least I think it's one of the coolest ones, is that when it's daylight in your dreams, how is that possible? How are you able to see the things of your dreams? There's no light in there. You're in your cranium at that point. It's a black box. How is it that your dreams are illumined? Well, that's the light of consciousness, right? And what is the light of consciousness? Well, Eckhart Tolle gave us that wonderful thing in his introduction to his book. Consciousness, the light of consciousness is love. Love and light are the same thing. They're not metaphors. Eckhart says light and love are the same thing. And so you see that your dream is flooded with the light of consciousness, the love of the divine, the love of God, right? This room right now, with all these lights I've turned on and all the windows I've opened. That's my beloved, right? Caressing me from every angle with love. This is how we grow to see this, by not forgetting that. So that we walk outside and we feel the heat of the sun on the arm, And our first thought isn't, oh, I'm getting a sunburn. Our first thought is, ah, yes, beloved, I love you too. This is how we see this. We start taking these simple statements and we start pounding them, pounding them into our reality to understand what they mean about the things that we look at, the things that we taste, touch, hear, smell, and we go inside and we look for the places where we're looking wrongly, where we've defined things incorrectly. We start using the right language, talking about the body when it belongs to the body, talking about the mind when it belongs to the mind, not using the words me and mine to talk about the things, right? Just banish the words me and mine from your vocabulary. That will force you to talk very differently about the things that you think you own, right? Because you own nothing. Everybody here in this world is a renter. Doesn't matter whether you paid for it all at once or not. You're a renter. Everybody's a renter, because the day you die, that house goes to someone else, and they'll probably rip your kitchen out first thing and start over. And where's the me and mine then? So Kali showed me that everything was full of consciousness. The image was consciousness. The altar was consciousness. The water vessels were consciousness. The door sill was consciousness. The marble floor was consciousness. Everything was consciousness. I found everything inside the room soaked, as it were, in bliss, the bliss of Satchitananda. Right? So that's that love, that light of consciousness. He saw everything in the room soaked in it. Everything in this room is soaked in it. He saw this room the same way I'm seeing it, but he saw it knowing what it was, not with an overlay map like I'm going to do when I sit there and think, oh, the light of love, the light of consciousness. I'm on the first step, I'm just starting to try and see this. But Ramakrishna, Mother was with him right there, right? Mother was with him right there, and she was showing him. She would push aside the green scum for a moment from the top of the water, and he would see, oh my, he would go into ecstasy. He couldn't move. He couldn't talk. He couldn't think. Everything would stop because he saw it as it was. And what was it? One without a second. One without a second with no change. The absolute. He saw through the change and saw that thing unchanging. He saw through the colors of the movie and saw the white screen behind it and knew that it was love, knew that it was divine. And he had an experience of that he could not override with ignorance, that he couldn't define differently. I found everything in the room soaked, as it were, in bliss, the bliss of Satchitananda. I saw a wicked man in the front of the Kali temple, but in him I also saw the power of the Divine Mother vibrating. This was why I fed a cat with food that was to be offered to the Divine Mother. I clearly perceived that the Divine Mother herself had become everything, even that cat. The manager of the temple garden wrote to Mathur Babu saying that I was feeding the cat with the offering intended for the Divine Mother. But Mathur Babu had insight into the state of my mind. He wrote back to the manager, let him do whatever he likes. You must not say anything to him. Right? I hope I get to do that someday, to feed the offering to the cat, seeing it as the divine. After realizing God, one sees all this aright, that it is he who has become the universe, the living beings, and the 24 cosmic principles. But what remains when God completely effaces the ego cannot be described in words, right? That which we really are, that which we will know when nothing is telling us anything. At that point, we will know this truth. Where he says, but that which remains when God completely effaces the ego cannot be described in words. As Ram Prasad said in one of his songs, then alone will you know whether you are good or I am good. I get into even that state now and then. There's Ramakrishna saying, that happens to me every now and then. You know, who's good? You're good. I'm good. Who's the doer? How is all of this happening? You know, you always see that in the avatars. They never say that they're the doers. You know, Ramakrishna is always blaming the Divine Mother. Divine Mother is always blaming Ramakrishna. Yeah. They go back and forth. They always talk about the other because they have no sense of that I, that egoism inside. A man sees a thing in one way through reasoning and in an altogether different way when God shows it to him, right? That is that one thing that I try and describe all the time. When we go in through the mind, when we use the mind and the senses to learn and to discern, we're going to get one story. In silence, coming from within the self, you will get a completely different vision, a completely different knowing of what is, right? The stuff that comes in through the mind comes in pieces, little chunks, little bits of truth, and you have to build it yourself. It's the IKEA of spiritual life. You get a nice flat pack called the Bible or called the Vedas. You bring those things home and you have to build your spirituality somehow out of them. But when God gives it to you, it comes in looking like a buffet, looking like it's already ready, and he just sets it there, and it's there in its entirety. No building, no fixing, no adjusting, nothing. It is what it is. It's clear what it is. It can't be seen as anything else. Boom. That's divine knowledge. And that's a very poor way of saying it, but it's just such an odd experience, you know, just such an odd experience. So a man sees a thing one way through reasoning and in an altogether different way when God himself shows it to him. Monday, December 17th, 1883. It was about 8 o'clock in the morning. Sri Ramakrishna was in his room with M when Dr. Madhu arrived and sat down beside the master on the small couch. He was an elderly man and full of wit. He used to visit the master when the latter felt indisposed. Master, the whole thing in a nutshell is that one must develop ecstatic love for Satchit Ananda. What kind of love? How should one love God? Gauri used to say that one must become like Sita to understand Rama, like Bhagavati, the Divine Mother, to understand Bhagavan, Shiva. One must practice austerity as Bhagavan did in order to attain Shiva. One must cultivate the attitude of Prakriti in order to realize Purusha, the attitude of a friend, a handmaid, or a mother. I saw Sita in a vision. I found that her entire mind was concentrated on Rama. She was totally indifferent to everything, to her hands, to her feet, to her clothes, to her jewels. It seemed that Rama had filled every bit of her life, and she could not remain alive without Rama. Yeah, wow. It's interesting. I mean, he's seeing the highest truth played out in a series of paper cutouts, almost like, you know, he says, I saw Sita in a vision. I saw that her entire mind was concentrated on Rama. There was nothing but Rama for her. There was not even a Sita for her. There was only a Rama for her. There's that one without a second. The seeming separations are disappearing, you know, there. She was totally indifferent to everything, right? Because she saw God, the one, everywhere. Even in her hands, her own hands, she wasn't the doer. She couldn't see herself as the doer, the manipulator. So she could watch it third party and see the beloved moving. the hands, the feet, the clothes, her jewels, all of it. It seemed that Rama had filled every bit of her. And again, where that whole notion, this is what must happen to us. No longer I who live, but Ramakrishna who is manifesting through me. No longer I who live, not this ego self that has a plan, that has a goal, that has a desire, that needs to take and own and hold, but the divine self, that self in me which needs nothing, requires nothing, is perfect as it is and has always been perfect as it is. That which is transcendent, to both the objects and the space, to both the silence and the words, that which contains them all. M says, yes, sir, she was mad with love for Rama. Master, mad, that's the word. One must become mad with love in order to realize God. That's your homework. That's your homework for next week. Go mad with love for Satchitananda. So in your meditation, just go insane. Just completely lose your stuff in love. Really, what a wonderful ideal. What a wonderful thing. Wow, how would you practice that? One must become mad with love in order to realize God. But that love is not possible if the mind dwells on woman and gold. Sex life with a woman, what happiness is there in that? The realization of God gives 10 million times more happiness. Gauri used to say that when a man attains ecstatic love of God, all the pores of the skin, even the roots of his hair, become like so many sex organs. And in every pore, the aspirant enjoys the happiness of communion with the Atman. So he's just we're going to stuff that I'm not normally allowed to talk about. But here he is, he's saying that, okay, fine, go after one of your vices. Go get your can of soda pop and enjoy that whole can. Ooh, I love the sugar. I love the sugar. And when it's over, it's over. It's done. It's finished. It's no more. And you have to go beg again for another one, right? But he's saying when you touch this, every pore of your body, every hair follicle on your body has an orgasm. That's what he's saying. You will, in fact, go mad for love of the divine, of Satchitananda, if you have that experience. And Greg told me about a brahmachari one time. See if Greg's here, can tell that story. He went and stayed in a cabin or something, and he meditated and had this spiritual experience where he found himself rising up way up in the air above the cabin. And he had that experience. He said it was like every single pore on my body was in ecstasy. Yes. Even the roots of her hair became like so many sex organs, and in every pore, the aspirant enjoys the happiness of the communion with the Atman. One must call on God with a longing heart. Yeah. Of course, mischievous mind is like, yeah, well, give me that experience. I'll definitely have a longing heart. No doubt about that. It's like amazing. I mean, just you see, we live life with our volume knob down between 0 and 1. We have no idea of the potentials of what living is, of what living can be. And that's egoism, because egoism wants us to feel safe, wants us to feel secure, wants us to feel in control. And so we've blocked out all of the infinites. We've blocked out all of the the immortalities, the limitless, areas, and we've put nice little fences there to keep ourselves safe. But boy, when we break out, boy, you're going to break out. Boy, oh boy, you're going to break out. One must call on God with a longing heart. One must learn from the Guru how God can be realized. Only if the Guru himself has attained perfect knowledge can he show the way. A man gets rid of all desires when he has perfect knowledge. He becomes like a child 5 years old. Sages like Dattatreya and Jadabharata had the nature of a child. One hears about them, but there were many others like them that the world doesn't hear about. Master, yes, the Gyani gets rid of all desire. If any is left, it does not hurt him. At the touch of the philosopher's stone, the sword is transformed into gold. Then that sword cannot do any killing. So the Gyani keeps only the semblance of anger and passion. They are anger and passion only in name, but cannot injure him. Yes, sir. The Gyani goes beyond the three gunas, as you say. He is not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas, or tamas. All these three are so many robbers, as it were. You know, this is, I wasn't quite sure what this meant. I had a nice conversation with Prabhupada about this at one point, you know, about how can you know, how can these guys still get angry? You know, I said, how can you be a realized soul and get angry? You know, how did Jesus go into the temple and flip all those tables over and pull out a bullwhip and start letting people have it? You know, it's like, how does that happen? And he said, well, there's no attachments involved in that anger, that it's like drawing a line on the water. They'll be angry, but as soon as the thing has been dealt with, there'll be no memory of it in them. There'll be no residue. There won't be a grudge. There will be no memory of that. It will never be held against that person again. You know, so that anger is in the moment. It's used as a tool to help break the ego of the student. You know, to give a teaching to the student. And as soon as it's done its thing, as soon as it's had its effect, it's gone from the mind of the teacher, because the teacher was not egoistically involved in it. The teacher was working through surrender, so that it was the universe itself, it was God herself, that was the doer, right? And they know that, they experience that, they see that, and so what is there for them to hold on to for a grudge? What's there? And so all of those things, you know, they play their parts, but without attachment, they come and go. They don't cause harm. They don't cause damage. Yeah, Yes, sir, the Gyani goes beyond the three gunas, as you say. He's not under the control of any of the gunas, sattva, rajas, or tamas. All these are so many robbers, as it were. Master, yes, one must assimilate that. Right? So this is the bottom line. This is where we started. So this is where we're going to end. You have to assimilate these things. We can't read them in a book. You can't leave them on these pages. You can't use them as ideas. Go inside and find them. Find these truths. Ramakrishna is talking about them because he is seeing them as he's talking about them. He's sharing about them because he has witnessed them. He has seen these things firsthand. And so for us, when he says you must assimilate that, he's telling you, take these beautiful flowers that I have here and go find the garden in your own self where they grew. They're growing in you right now, and they're available to you to find and to see and to experience. Just don't be so enamored with what you think things are. Right? Let go of that and start looking for something deeper, something behind everything, something that ties everything together. Master, yes, one must assimilate that. In this world, there are perhaps not more than 3 or 4 men of perfect knowledge. Master, why do you say that? One sees many holy men and sannyasins in the monasteries of Upper India. M. Will I too can become a sannyasi like one of those? The master fixed his gaze on M and said, by renouncing everything? M. What can man achieve unless he gets rid of Maya? What will a man gain by merely being a sannyasi if he cannot subdue Maya? Both remained silent for a few minutes. And we'll pick up after that silence next week.